So, Jason, this is our third in our series of Q jumping podcasts to talk about updates, a sudden flurry of updates in the world of quantum computing, and in particular, the drive toward a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. And in particular, we mentioned 2 episodes ago, we discussed Google's strong statement to move the deadline for PQC from 2030 to 2029. We talked about a paper that came out on the 31st of March, 2026, that reduces the number of stable qubits required. And this paper, which came out on March 30, 2026, which was from a series of researchers at Google Quantum AI, and also some researchers from some other universities, and I'm not going to list all their names, but you can see them for yourselves, reads, quote, the title is Securing Elliptic Curve Cryptocurrencies Against Quantum Vulnerabilities, Resource Estimates and Mitigations. So that's what you need to look it up. What's the gist of what the paper says, Jay?
There's quite a bit here. Forgive me for taking a little bit of time to go through it. Again, another dense paper. And I got to tell you, everybody who's listening to this podcast, you have to be watching this last flurry of podcasts Tim and I are putting out. One of them about the 10,000 physical qubits being sufficient to break ECC, potentially with a new form of optical stabilization of physical qubits, and etc. And I think this is related, Tim, because essentially what's being said here in this paper is that there is an accelerated timeline for breaking 256-bit elliptic curve. And very specifically, they're talking about curve SECP 256K1, which is the cryptographic foundation for almost all modern blockchains. You've heard it here on this podcast, Tim. Every single crypto wallet is a key pair. And that key pair is typically using that specific 256-bit elliptic curve cryptography. And so what Google is saying here is, look, we've got a lot of evidence that that particular elliptic curve might be at risk. And what they're calling out here is a really heavy emphasis on Bitcoin, Tim. Mm-hmm. And they're calling out risks to vulnerabilities in Bitcoin, Ethereum, other networks that are targeting smart contracts, right, proof of stake consensus, data availability, and various kinds of tokenization around stable coins. And so, Tim, this is, I think this made the rounds in the crypto community. And we're talking about, the word crypto in terms of cryptocurrencies.
Right.
Because finally they realized that the whole quantum story absolutely applied to them. And this is Google's warning shot, just like they're giving the warning shot of, hey, we're getting ready by 2029. By the way, all y'all who are doing cryptocurrencies, you're not just not immune to this, but we have reason to believe that ECC cryptography will, fall or have to be deprecated at some point. So they're going as far as to say, Tim, this is my final point. Mm-hmm. Google's basically saying a major shift for the scientific community. They're going to stop publishing attack mechanics on this because they don't want to simply speed up the inevitability.
Yes.
They're also moving to a responsible disclosure program, right? Mm-hmm. This is them basically saying, since we're going to shut down publishing attack mechanics, if you want to talk to us about this, or if you want to tell us how things are being broken, we're going to have a responsible disclosure program. And so this is a dual wake-up call, Tim. This paper is a wake-up call to financial policymakers and to the quantum community in general.
And so there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, let me just quickly say, I am reminded, of course, of our episode that we did probably within the last month or so, where we talked about Jeffries getting out of cryptocurrency for exactly this fear.
They
And
sold
exactly
their
this
Bitcoin
reason.
because of
Yeah.
this.
And boy, that's looking prescient now, isn't it?
Well, here it is. Now the details are coming out.
Yeah.
To the point where it's like, this isn't even a science experiment.
Yeah.
We're so scared of this that we're actually going to turn this into like standard bug reporting program.
Absolutely. And then, that's the other thing is just, I think this is an important development just in terms of the maturity of this, to say we are going to move into the kind of bug reporting and responsible disclosure processes that have been, established for decades in the world of software vulnerabilities and 0 days. And now we're going to treat these things like 0 days, as opposed to acting like we're academics publishing our theoretical papers about math and cryptography, talking to other academics, right? This is moving into a world of talking to implementers and, following the processes that have been established for the overall security of everybody who depends on computers.
Google just said to you multiple things. In fact, you've just heard about this on the stream of podcasts that we've done just recently. Basically, Google's saying they're getting ready by 2029 no matter what. Google previously said, hey, we're going to be accepting Merkle tree certificates as a concept within the Chrome root store program, like soon. And then they started saying, by the way, due to this research we're seeing about the incredible collapse of the need for millions of physical qubits down to tens of thousands, I think, Tim, now what they're saying, this is an all-out effort to now say, we can't talk about this as a science experiment anymore. We have to now, at this point, in 2026, April 2026, as we're talking right now, it is no longer a science experiment. Google's considering it an inevitability to the point where it's normal IT practices now to consider this, like ECC might be failing, Tim.
And so, let's talk about that. That was the other thing I wanted to unpack. I understand that this paper is focused real specifically on cryptocurrencies, and I understand your perspective that this is a really good wake-up call for the people in the cryptocurrency world, and I agree with all of that. However, ECC has much broader applications than only cryptocurrency. So when we see this revelation here, should we jump to the conclusion that all ECC use cases are vulnerable or weakened?
I would say, Tim, that I think if we think like a scientist for a moment and take this paper for its its value, for what's written,
right?
That's why I called out specifically the curve that they're talking about.
Yes,
and I'm gonna say the scientific part out loud, and then I'll say the part that you and I would say over a beverage, which is scientifically, yes, they're calling this out as, we see a weakness potentially in the future on a specific curve that's used by the vast majority of cryptocurrencies. Boom. Right. And that's a good thing to say, because the cryptocurrency community can't sleep anymore on it. Are you going to ignore Google? Right.
And the value of that is clear, and I'm not disputing that.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is, should we extend that concern to other use cases too surrounding ECC?
I think what you should do is listen to the previous podcast where we said between 10 and 26,000 physical qubits with a specific optical error correction mechanism and stabilization mechanism might be creating the equivalent of a cryptographically relevant quantum computer against ECC in general. Mm-hmm. So, yes, Tim, I think this paper is just a side, it's a side story to the big story. That's what this is.
But then the two of them in constellation and, at least hints of other important announcements on their way. suggest that the progress of actually getting to QCRC and the consequences of that, QRQC, whatever I said, wasn't it? That the consequences
CRQC.
of that, CRQC. Thank you. I got it wrong twice. CRQC. That the consequences of that are going to be, possibly sooner than we were all guessing. And it sure doesn't feel like it's going in the other direction now, does
it? And that's the biggest point, Tim. That is the biggest point. I said earlier, I'm not super interested in putting, individual days on a calendar. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is, for all y'all who are thinking that it's like, oh yeah, 2040, I'm going to be retired by then, I couldn't care less. No, folks, things are going to get really interesting really fast. Google's giving you multiple warning shots within weeks. So Giddy up.
Giddy up. All right. Thank you very much, Jay.
Thanks, Tim.